made the connection either.
Squared away, and then we'll kick off.
All right, let's go ahead and kick it off. We have folks coming in, so welcome. You are in the Reality Bytes, Innovative Learning Using Augmented and Virtual Reality. My name is Joe Morlock. I'm the superintendent of Newburgh Public Schools. Glad to be here. One of your ACPE board members who is helping put on this year's conference. We're glad you're here. I know many of us may be a little bit tired of doing it virtually, but we'll hope that you're having a good experience. We're having a little bit of fun on the back end, as you can imagine, with the knuckleheads that are on the board with me. So thanks again to our folks from Ready Learner One. I'll introduce them as I see them on my screen. So Christine Lyon-Bailey, we have Micah Shippey, and we have Jesse Lubinsky, and they are ready to go. So I'm going to disappear for a little bit. If you have questions, please go ahead and put them in the Conversations tab. In the upper right where you'll see the other folks. You can either do them in chat or do them in Q&A, and I will look at those and we'll moderate those when we get down to the end. We'll have some questions. If you want to come up and ask them or ridicule them afterwards, we can do that as well. So the folks from Ready Learner One, take it away.
All right, thank you so much for introducing us. We're super excited to be here and present Reality Bytes, Innovative Learning Using Augmented and Virtual Reality. As Joe mentioned, we are the Ready Learner One exec team. So Micah Shippey is our CEO, Christine Lyon-Bailey is our Chief Strategy Officer, and I'm the Chief Learning Officer. And interestingly enough, this session, Reality Bytes, the original name of Reality Bytes, our book, was Ready Learner One. It was originally just going to be a book, but it quickly turned into something way more than that, and I'm sure we'll share that with you over the course of this session. But as you see our slides on the screen, we just want to make sure you have access to these and some of the resources that are clickable within them. So this address, this link, and if one of you can drop this into the chat, bit.ly/ACPE Reality Bytes, that will take you to the slides for today's session and give you a little bit of an overview of the work we're doing, especially in the augmented and virtual reality space. So again, this book is actually Reality Bytes. This session is actually one of 3 books we've released in the past couple of years. So Micah actually was the author of Wanderlust EDU, An Educator's Guide to Innovation, Change, and Adventure. The 3 of us co-authored Reality Bytes, which we're going to be talking about today. And then Christine and I were on a team that co-authored the Esports Education Playbook, Empowering Every Learner Through Inclusive Gaming. And myself and one of our other co-authors, Chris Aviles, will be doing a session tomorrow at the same time on that, so please join us for that. But one of the things that we really wanted to do with Reality Bytes, we view emerging technology as one of these things in school districts. If you've been in a school, you always have your early adopters, but even with those teachers that are super passionate about technology, sometimes it can even take up to a decade to see widespread adoption of some of these amazing technologies, which, truth be told, can have such an incredible impact on our students. So what we wanted to do was not just introduce people to the technologies, but to really give them a sense of how they can be leveraged in powerful ways, but also create a framework that describes how learning occurs using these tools. So part of what we're going to do during today's session is share with you a framework we've created that think of it as almost like a SAMR model, but specifically for AR and VR. And we're going to be doing a lot of demos today, so a lot of sharing of different examples, and some interactive ones where you're going to be able to participate as well. So, these are just statistics, and again, I'm not going to spend time just reading them off of here, but as you can imagine, there's been huge growth in the augmented and virtual reality markets. But like with anything in schools, one of the questions we always get is, okay, cool, what headset can I get for cheap? And as you'll quickly see, it's not even about the headsets necessarily to be able to accomplish some of the incredible learning opportunities that are available for students through these technologies. And with that, this might actually be a good chance just to show you that the headsets aren't really needed. The book itself, Reality Bytes, is actually an interactive experience in and of itself. So we have some links here, but I'm just going to drop out. Christine, do you want to maybe show everyone what happens with the book?
Sure, I'd love to. So one of the great things about Reality Bytes is that we worked with a developer to actually practice what we preach. And so a lot of elements in the book are, those are my children, by the way. A lot of the elements in the book are augmented. So I'm going to open my camera and show you, this is the cover of the book. It's just sitting on my desk. It's not doing anything. But if I scan the QR code on the back cover, it will actually open an AR camera. And through that AR camera, I can launch the cover of the book. So here's our book. And there is Micah, Jesse, and myself. And you can't hear it because we're tethered right now, so it's taking the sound away, but we're actually telling you about the book. So we each take a turn. Our voices are part of the experience, and we go through the process of introducing the book to you. In addition to the cover, each of the chapter title pages are also augmented. My lighting might be bad. So there's Romeo and Juliet, and I can tap to activate, and he gets down on one knee. I can actually use my finger to move around the image to interact with it in a variety of different ways. So it's just a really neat way of demoing for the reader and engaging the reader in the technology.
Can you just show either the heart or one of the other ones that's a multi-use experience? But while you're doing that, I think the big thing to note is these are web-based. This is web-based augmented reality. So we felt it was really important that if we were going to be talking about and defining cutting-edge technology, we really needed to be using technology that was at the cutting edge. And actually, since we published the book in January of 2020, the cost of even doing something like this has greatly gone down. So these types of experiences are easy to create and then deploy without needing any type of additional hardware. So
yeah, there's a lot of conversation about 5G technology and how 5G is going to change education, training, learning, knowledge transfer. And that's the cool thing about web-based AR is that this technology will be streamed. So right now, Christine is streaming this heart and connecting it. She didn't download an app for the heart. It's all web-based. So how far away are we from putting that into our glasses and being able to see it? It's so lightweight if you can stream it. It's pretty awesome.
Well, the answer is we're probably pretty close to that, because I think we've heard in the news, Apple glasses are right around the corner and other developers. But just for a quick, I know we were going to do this in a few minutes, but I think it's probably good to do this up at the top, is just, define what we're talking about when we're talking about AR and VR. So when we're talking about AR, we're talking about augmented reality, which is in augmenting the world around us by laying technology or laying images and content over that. Whereas in virtual reality, we're talking about digital content or a completely digital environment. So during this session, we'll actually be showing you, I know we just showed you a web-based AR experience, but we'll also be sharing some web-based VR experiences as well that you'll be able to participate in and get a sense of what that can look like. So without the headsets for the immersive VR that we often talk about. And actually, if you wanted to give a test, even though you may not have the book, we did put one of the QR codes and one of the experiences directly here in the slide. So you can watch the video of the heart, or you can actually scan this QR code, which will then, you could put over over the image of the bat, and a bat should actually pop up and let you do that. So Micah, this might be a good chance for you to talk about our work with the Sustainable Development Goals.
Yeah, so a lot of times we put this technology first, and we forget to take a step back and think about how can we meaningfully use this technology to promote learning that's going to benefit our students in their future. And so a lot of our conversations with schools in both K-12 and higher ed is centers on using the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals to guide meaningful questions, which then we argue that the technology can help to facilitate either the questions and the problem or prototype solutions. So we just wanted to pause there and kind of remind all of us that it's important to make sure that question is out in front and that the technology is supporting that, and we're not just using the latest and greatest tech because it's cool. Partnerships for the goals. Here we see you can bring global education communities together with these new technologies. Social VR is amazing for that, for bringing people together in bold new ways. But as the next slide shows us, we know that technology is a disruptor. This is the activity theory pyramid. It's one of my favorites. It's my jam. I'll try to keep it to 30 seconds or less.
Please.
Here, if you insert something where it says tools at the top, so insert augmented reality, it disrupts everything. And so when we look at activity theory, well, thank you, Joe, for recognizing activity theory. Got some angstrom up in the house. Love it.
Joe, we have a ton of stuff for you to read about this.
Joe,
you just made Mike a whole day.
The disruption. What disruption is going to happen to people, to learning objects, our goals, our community? How is it going to change? We have to be thinking about that. It doesn't mean don't deploy new tech. It just means be prepared for things to shift. And if you take this triangle and you put it underneath various components of adoption, we can start to plan for this disruption and plan change. It helps calm us down a little bit when we think about how disruptive change really is. We know that there are 5 major themes or principles from Merrill's research on learning, and we believe that augmented and virtual reality, as well as other emergent technologies, are at the forefront for maximizing the application of learning, demonstration of learning, the integration of learning into a meaningful context. I mean, think about working with esports to teach team skills, and yet these are esports that students use in their world. So therefore, you're connecting it or integrating it. Solving real-world problems connects us back to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And those are the big questions that we want to be asking students about. How are we going to prepare ourselves for your future?
And, Mike, I think one thing to just point out quickly is, we do a ton of work here in the U.S., but with most of the districts and schools we work with, I should say schools, not districts, but that we work with internationally, a lot of that work is focused through the lens of the SDGs.
Yeah. I mean, we talk about STEM and we talk about STEAM, and it's very meaningful. But on a global level, the SDGs sync up some real powerful questions that do not put technology first. They put the problem first. And that's, I think, what we would like to do. Empathy is a huge component of virtual reality in particular. When you think about presence, one thing a teacher always wants is for their learners to have a sense of presence, eye contact, mental engagement, auditory engagement, verbal engagement with content. And augmented and virtual reality both offer that in 2 different ways. In augmented reality, I could look around the book like Christine was showing us, and my presence would be shared by people with me physically. In virtual reality, I can either by myself or with a group go into a new place in a new world. And just by putting on one of these headsets, I feel that I'm transported elsewhere. And then taking them off, if I feel like I'm back, then it's a meaningful experience. And the Anne Frank House is one that I've used with middle school students 3 or 4 times.
We're going to show that later.
Yeah, I used it not too long ago, 2 weeks ago with middle school students, and I tell you, it blew their mind. But here's an example of really feeling a sense of other, being in somebody else's shoes. Students who completed this said things like, I felt that I was actually there. I had to be cautious. This is a student saying this. They're literally in Anne Frank's shoes. But see, that's an example. Go ahead, Jesse.
I was going to say research that we captured as we were writing the book showed that when students are able to access these types of immersive experiences, their memory retention is better. Ultimately, they have beyond even the what they're able to kind of demonstrate in terms of knowledge. Like you talked about, that social emotional learning and the empathy component is there, whereas it's not in a traditional classroom setting.
Yeah, and in both hard and soft skills, the research is just growing about how powerful this is and how scalable it is. There's a research of a nursing program in particular that was studying tracheotomy. And they said, well, we train them in tracheotomy in face-to-face, and we train them in VR, 2 different cohorts. Then we tested them, and there was no significant difference. That's a good thing. That means you can scale this big time with VR, and they can maximize the training effect. But we know that training and learning is not just about the single learner. And this battery represents a single learner, right? You want to integrate or add or think about the social aspect of learning. And social learning is very, very powerful. And we argue that while the technologies are great, we have to consider meaningful conversations, either in the technology, after the technology, or both.
Yeah, that's great. This would be a good time to kind of dive a little bit deeper into the what is AR and VR, and we already did tap on it already. This, is kind of the old school virtual reality, but even more relevant to most of us might be something like this. And the reason that old Viewmaster, and the reason why we talk about that is, VR, as we define it and talk about it lately, when we talk about like a digital or a different type of environment, it doesn't have to be immersive. Meaning that Anne Frank house experience, for instance, requires use of the headset. But as we talk about things, and you see the thing on the other side, we have Google Cardboard. The VR is not defined by its immersive component. It's defined by the learning outcomes that it's able to create through those types of experiences. Now, I don't want to spend a lot of time with you guys watching videos, but here on the next couple slides, if you want to learn a little bit more about what is AR and what is VR, you could do a little bit of a deeper dive into that. But Micah, specifically, you had always talked about AR having 3 components to it, or 3 types of categories.
Yeah. You saw with the book where Christine just showed her phone to the book. That was really device-based, maybe a little bit of hybrid there, because wherever her phone is, she's able to launch it. Well, I misspoke. It is target-based because the book does need to be there. With device-based, we can drop an augmented reality object into a room based on the room, like a flat surface, or geolocation, which is location-based. So Pokemon Go made location-based AR kind of exciting for more people and more accessible. So you've got a target like the book, geolocation, and then device-based, allowing us to put it really on any flat object. With LiDAR technology on Apple phones now, that's becoming easier and easier to scan and place augmented reality images.
And, I think people think AR is relatively new, but if you think about some of the ways that the applications of augmented reality, even the last few years, going back to Pokemon Go in 2016, or, Snapchat filters the last few years, this stuff has been around for a while. And in fact, we had our illustrator kind of put us into scenarios based on what we've experienced. But my first experience was actually using the Yelp app, and this had to be back in like 2011, 2012, where they had a monocle feature. And I remember standing on 10th Avenue in New York City and holding up my phone and basically seeing reviews posted all the way up and down the avenue over the restaurants where they were sitting. And that type of technology is actually being used now through a variety of different applications where you can actually go and explore the real world in augmented reality. But we did say we wanted to have you guys demoing. So one of our favorite little quick demos, if you want to just use your phone and scan the QR code on the screen. Eighth Wall is a company, they've actually partnered with us on the book to enable some of those technology tools that we showed you with the use of the book. But Christine, I know this is one of your favorites. What happens when they click on this?
So when you launch this experience, and I don't want to do a demo for you because then you can't do it yourself, but you'll have the delightful experience of throwing money at a robot right in the environment that you are sitting in. So a robot will appear and it's completely device-based AR. So it's not target-based. It's not reliant upon anything other than you having a space to work with and a device in your hand. So go ahead and take a moment and experience that if you'd like.
I knew you guys were thinking you wanted to come to this session because you heard the rumor that you were going to be able to throw money, virtual money at a robot. Mm-hmm. Big moment.
Millions, hundreds of millions of dollars to the robot.
It's kind of a big deal.
All the money. So, we talked a little bit about what AR and VR are. I think it's important for us to kind of segue over to those, how it impacts teaching and learning, and ultimately how we develop this framework through the book. So, Christine, if you don't mind talking us a little bit through the XRAB Framework, what it is, and
Sure.
what it looks like.
Yeah, I'd love to. So when we started writing the book, we knew that we wanted to, explore both the use of augmented and virtual reality in the classroom, but we wanted to make it really meaningful for educators, right? Because technology is only as good as what you're doing with it with the students. Tech for tech's sake is pretty meaningless at the end of the day. So what we did is we built a framework that would allow teachers to really see ways that it could be adopted into their classrooms with meaning and purpose. So Jesse, if you want to go to if you want to click ahead, keep going. I should state that everything in the book is actually aligned to the ISTE standards, both the standards for educators and the standards for students. And we wanted to make sure that we're aligning with those standards so that, you know, we recognize that all of our teaching and learning is based upon some standards somewhere along the line. So, gotcha.
And I feel like I should tell everyone. Right? Okay, go ahead. No, I was going to say, we knew absorb and create, but that B word took us a long time.
Long time.
That B word was tough, let me tell you. So, a lot of lists of words. So what we did is we created the ABC framework, and it was ironic that it ended up being the ABC framework. It wasn't intentional until we had the A and the C, and then we forcefully found a B. But ABC stands for absorb, blend, and create. And ultimately what it is it's not levels of adoption, because that's not really a fair statement. Absorbing content is just as important and just as valuable as creating and blending with content, depending on the circumstances and the desired learning outcomes. So rather than calling it levels of adoption, it's styles of adoption. And that's a really important aspect to keep in mind as you're talking about how we can bring these types of emerging technology into the classroom. So absorbing is basically the concept of consuming content, taking it in, absorbing it. Blending is taking what exists already and sort of manipulating it, not creating you're creating outcomes with existing items, but you're not creating something from a blank slate. And then the create concept is literally creating an entirely new experience through the power of the technology. And we're going to give you specific examples of how to achieve all of these styles of adoption across both AR and VR.
Right. So essentially what we want to do during for a big chunk of the session is walk you through the various components of ABC within both AR and VR. So, you know, starting with AR Absorb, I think when we think of AR Absorb experiences, ultimately it's leveraging augmented reality in a very simple way, right? As Christine mentioned before, there's no content creation, there's very little interactivity. It's simply a matter of kind of using your device or leveraging the AR content that's put there in front of you. One of my jobs on the book is I'm the pop culture kind of geek among us. So when we were originally pitching the idea to people and talking about AR and VR, oftentimes the conversations would veer into, oh, it's kind of like that movie. And what we realized was, you know, it's a lot easier for people to make these connections when there's some type of mental construct for them to wrap their head around. So, you know, in AR Absorb, there's tons of examples of AR Absorb in the movies, from Jarvis and Iron Man's suit, the targeting system in Top Gun. If you remember in Kingsman: The Secret Service, there's a meeting where he puts on glasses and everyone appears in seats in front of him. Those are all examples of AR Absorb experiences that have occurred in pop culture. Now, this one's one of our absolute favorites. Christine, I'm gonna kick it over to you to demo this, but I don't know how many of you knew this, but the Google Translate app, the app version, has an AR component that actually allows you to do some pretty amazing stuff. So Christine, I'll stop screen sharing so that you can give us a little demo of that.
I had to quick find something on my desk to translate here.
Oh, the next two slides.
All right. I know, but I can't see them.
Oh, that's right.
You're not showing them. Actually, you know what? Hold on, I can, because I can pull it up on my computer. It's fine. What slide number are you on, Jesse? I'm sorry.
38.
Okay, great. All right, perfect. So Google Translate is a very handy app, regardless of where you are, whether you're in a classroom or in a train station somewhere in the world, or participating in a very strange geography trivia contest, which is what I'm going to demo for you now. So when you open Translate, what a lot of people don't know is there's actually something as simple as having a camera to use augmented reality as a translate feature in Google Translate. So if you'll notice on the screen there, in the upper portion of the screen, there's that camera icon. So if I go ahead and click on that, I'm going to try not to make you all queasy with my shaky hand syndrome. I always am in the demoer and I have the shakiest hands out of all of us, I think. All right, so I'm going to pull up the slide deck and I'm actually going to point my phone at the screen here, and I'm going to select my language. So the clue is written in German, and when I hold my phone up to it, it will actually translate the words right into English for me. So, and I can go ahead and pause the translation. So on the bottom of the screen there, I can pause it so that it's actually a photograph. So now I'm not making all queasy with my shaky hand. So if I go ahead and go to the next slide, you can see that it just translated it again. So this one says, it's hard for me to show you without, hold on a sec. That's what it looks like on my screen. And then, sorry. That is what it looks like when it's translated. So it's actually just imposing the English words right over the German words on my screen.
Now, on the slide 37, I actually added a link to a video called Can Your Phone Translate Signs on the Fly, where a couple of Googlers, their 20% time project was to talk to engineers about various technologies that they've been developing. So if you're curious as to how they actually, the algorithms involved in actually doing that, that video is a 6-minute watch. It's really incredibly interesting. But Christine had set the languages, but you can actually have it to auto-detect. So let's say we're not even sure what the language is. You can basically have it figure that out and transcribe. One thing I will say is you do have to be a little careful. While it will translate, it also doesn't fix grammar. So for instance, if I were to do sopa de pollo, it will not turn it to chicken soup. It'll say soup of chicken. So, but it gives you enough of a context to what you're actually trying to figure out. I feel like it's a good enough start. Hold on one sec. I'll share the slides again. So, I shouldn't have kicked it away from you, Christine. This is your jam. This is the Merge Cube. So all three of us are Merge ambassadors. I'm sure, you shouldn't even say I'm sure. You may be familiar with the Merge Cube. So the Merge Cube, there was kind of a craze in education a few years ago because Walmart started selling these for $1. But this is essentially a foam cube. You can see it has like 6 sides to it. Wait, yep, 6 sides. Cube, duh. But this is essentially just 6 QR codes. There's 6 unique QR codes. But they've developed a platform that allows for a ton of different educational uses. And so, Christine has used these a ton. So I should actually add, on top of Christine being our Chief Strategy Officer, she is also an elementary principal. And on top of that, she is also a district-wide Director of Technology and Innovation.
Yeah, just a few hats.
I'm going to leave the other hats away. There's 5 other ones too, but we don't need to get into all that too.
Excuse me. So the Explorer app looks like this in the corner, in the center of my screen with the little binoculars. And when I click on it, it opens up to all these different experiences that you can leverage the Merge Cube to engage with. So the one that I love is Galactic Explorer. However, there are tons of really great experiences that you can do with students. But what Galactic Explorer is going to do is it's actually going to turn the cube into the solar system for us. So if I go ahead and launch the experience, you can see the cube here on my desk, and it turns that cube into the solar system. And each side of the cube, so each target or each code on each side of the cube is a different aspect of the solar system. So as I turn the cube in my hands, I'm turning the solar system and looking at it from different perspectives, which is really pretty neat also. You can interact with the solar system, so I can choose any arbitrary planet. I don't know which one's which because I was once a social studies teacher, not a science teacher. So we'll pick this one, Jupiter. Okay, so there's Jupiter, and you can see that we can look at the celestial bodies that surround Jupiter. I think I'm doing pretty good so far. And I can also, there's that shaky hand again. Can't get my thumb up there. I can click on that little info card and it will give me specific facts about the planet as well. I can click back out and I can click back out again to revisit the solar system.
I think the important part to especially for like district leadership or things like that is, people get very hung up on the fact that, okay, so do I need these cubes or what do I need to be able to use like this stuff? And the truth is, during the pandemic, and even before that, Merge has paper versions of their cube, like a PDF, available online. So we were doing activities with schools where we were having students, just print out the paper, cut it out, and basically tape together the cube, because ultimately the QR codes are just that. They're just static QR codes. It's the learning platform that has all of the different things that Christine's demoing right now.
Yeah, and they've upgraded another app of theirs called Object Viewer, where you have a world view or the cube view. So you could drop something right in your world, or you could use the cube to view the same asset.
Yeah, so you can also make the cube itself as big or small as you want. So you can print the sides of the cube out in like gigantic poster size and hang it on the walls of the classroom, and have these giant solar systems, or any other experience that is aligned with the Merge cube. You can also stamp it and leave it in place. So if I hit the little stamper icon in the bottom right, which is not working right this moment. So I swear if you hit that stamper icon and you move the cube, the solar system will stay in place, and then you can actually physically walk around it and move your body instead of move the cube.
I was just about to say the stamp feature, which isn't specific to Merge, because there are other products that we've used that have that type of feature. But just to give you an idea of how that could be leveraged in a classroom setting, similar with a solar system, but not quite. We didn't use this. But what was it called? Like a doodle? Oh man, not doodle jump. But basically a stamp feature where essentially you can have students demonstrate relative distance by stamping, and then ultimately showing, okay, so from here, let's say this is Earth. Let's say 3 steps is 1,000,000 miles. This is how far it would be to the next planet, and so forth, where you can essentially, have them create in real space models, but ultimately no materials are actually being used in order to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty neat. Jesse, before you take the screen, go ahead, what?
That was it, Doodle Lens.
Doodle Lens, right.
While you're here, Christine, do you want to just show Civilizations
BBC?
AR?
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say. All right, so BBC has a really amazing app as well called BBC Civilizations. It looks like the one right in the middle of my screen that says BBC Civilizations. They make it really easy. So if I go ahead and open it, this is actually one of my favorites. And you're about to get a probably horrifying view of my playroom. I made my children clean it, but it's still not really that great. I threatened them and said I wouldn't make dinner if they didn't clean it. So I'm actually going to come over here, and we're going to try to get it to launch. This room has terrible lighting. Okay, here we go. So we're going to bring up the globe in the middle of my playroom right now. There it is. And I can go ahead and use my finger to drag the globe around so I can rotate the globe. I could also go and walk around the globe if I wanted to, but I'm tethered to the computer. And so you'll notice across the top, there are different themes. So early civilizations, human body, faith, encounters, progress and modernity, etc. So if I go back to human body, because this is probably one of my favorites, at the bottom, you'll see it says artifact 1 of 10, mummy and Egyptian coffin, and then you can scroll through all the different ones. But if I pick that mummy, so I once upon a time taught world history, and I would have given anything to take my students to Egypt to actually experience what the mummies were like, and just to experience the whole concept of mummification, not actually experience it, but learn more about it. But now I can bring this mummy right into my classroom or my semi-clean playroom, and I can take that mummy and I can turn him around. I can move him so I can bring him closer. I can scale him up and down so I can make him, I can make him larger or smaller. So I can make him really, really big. Or
the thing about that is when you keep him on 1.0, what it's actually saying is that 1.0, that's the actual size of the object. And the reason I bring this up is because one of the reasons I'm happy we haven't been traveling lately is because whenever we demo this in person, I'm the one who has to lay on the ground next to the sarcophagus.
So Jesse, luckily, I happen to have this giant teddy bear that looks just like you. So if I put it on the ground right now,
oh, cool,
you can see that he's almost the same size as that mummy, which is quite remarkable.
Remarkable.
So anyway, there's all different features. There's an info card, so I can pull up information about him. I can use the full flashlight, which will show me points of interest. I can listen to information. I can actually x-ray him, and now I can see inside of him. And as I get closer, or her, as I get closer, I can see all the different things about the mummy. So it's just a really neat way to bring the learning right to the hands of your students, and just make it really engaging and really exciting for them. It's one of my favorites.
From a device standpoint, Christine, the BBC app is fully downloaded. So is a lot of the merge stuff. So if it's a fully downloaded app, that lowers the barrier for the product. So you could have an older iPad and do a lot of these. If your school has an old iPad cart, you do not need the latest and greatest, newest. That's important to know. Now, some of these do require new AR Core, AR Kit for Android and Apple, but not all of them.
Right, and I think that's and actually BBC is an example that's free. The app's free, the content's free. So depending on what you're looking to do, the road to adoption is a lot easier because a lot of this stuff can leverage existing technology and also free apps and content that's available online. Yeah. And actually, the first thing we're going to show you in AR Blend is a free one as well. And actually, I'll open my slides in a second because then I think Christine and I are each going to take turns demoing something. But, so we took a look at AR Absorb. Now we're talking about AR Blend. So we're moving from just simply consuming content to now a deeper level of interaction with that content. And so actually, what you're seeing on the screen is actually something called Quiver Vision. Quiver Vision is actually great. They actually partnered with us on the book and shared some free content that's available within the book for educators. But essentially, Quiver content was developed for elementary age students where you can take coloring pages and then bring them to life. And I think right before we jumped on, Christine said she actually had one available for a quick demo. But we found a ton of really useful ways to integrate this into school settings.
Yeah, and that Quiver video is showing you an almost 10-year-old example. It's been around that long.
So something that's really neat that you can use Quiver for is interactive like reviews with your students. So I'm just opening my camera app for a second. So this is just a coloring page. It's nothing fancy. It's an animal cell. You'll notice at the top are the cell things, the labels for the cell, parts of the cell, sorry. There is a technical name. And then my outstanding coloring skills. So I'm actually going to take this coloring page and I'm going to bring it to life with the Quiver app. So I'm going to go ahead and open Quiver. And there are hundreds of different types of coloring pages for different content areas. But if I go ahead and bring my cell into focus of my camera, here we go. It's happening. There it is. So there's my cell. And I can move around the cell and look at it from different angles. And when I tap on it, the different parts of the cell will pop up. So it's actually quizzing me, just like it did on the sheet. It's asking me, well, which one of these is the cell membrane? And so it's that one right there. And so you can navigate through and say, okay, well, that one is the cell nucleus. And you can see it's kind of like flashing. This guy over here, these funky blue thingies are the endoplasmic reticulum. And so you can go through and you can study the different parts of the cell. But what's really neat is you can also turn this into a quiz. Sorry. Where's the
light bulb, I think? Is that what it is?
Is it the light bulb? No, turn on a flashlight.
Try that light bulb right there.
Oh, here we go. Thank you, Micah. So you can actually test your skill by taking the little quiz. So it'll say, okay, which part of this cell is the flashing part? Which one is it? And so it's a little hard to see because my lighting isn't so good right now. But there is a flashing piece of the membrane there, or the membrane of the cell. And so if I click on this, I said, okay, it's the mitochondrion, but it wasn't. And then you'll see the yellow thing in the middle is flashing. It wants to know what that is. Well, I know that's the cell nucleus. So you can go through and you can use it as an interactive study guide, which is pretty neat.
I love on this and on the Merge and on BBC, you can do a record screen, have the students do the pull down, record it, narrate over the top, and you can get some pretty powerful reflections and conversations from students.
Yep. Here's another one. This is just a Starbucks cup that you can do a label for. So we had students do this as a thank you when the pandemic first started for our first responders. They each designed like a cup to, this one has a hard time scanning all the time. They each designed a cup to thank first responders, and then the cup will pop up out of the screen in 3D mode, but it's not right now.
I'm ready to roll with the next one.
Go ahead.
We can just, actually, I'm not even going to reshare my screen. I'm just going to go right into the next demo, which is on the next slide, which is a tool called Jigspace. So, hold on a second. Movie recording. Okay, so Jigspace is actually one of our favorites because it is Blend, but there are components of it which actually can kind of bleed over into Create. Well, what you have here, and again, this is a free app. You look at this database of what they call jigs, and notice that they're around a variety of different subjects. But because this is May the 4th be with you, let's check out anatomy of a lightsaber. So notice I have information here about the content, but if I do view in AR, what it will allow me to do is actually point it at a flat surface. There we go. I'll tap to place it. And now, similar to what you saw with the book resources, I can actually make this bigger, resize it, manipulate it. But what happens is, notice how on the lower left-hand side it says, tap here to start a live group presentation. If I have my other students on devices as well, I can essentially do this as a presentation where they're pointing their devices at the same spot and still able to kind of see what I'm about to do presentation-wise. If you look on the right-hand side of the screen, it says 1 out of 11. So there are 11 sections to this jig where now I can break this, I can take this apart, start exploring it piece by piece. Now, while a lightsaber might not have a ton of practical application in the classroom, if you take a look at the database, there's a ton of things like how jet engines work, different battles in history, where you can actually start to take these things apart and start to expand and present. But what's really cool is there's another tool called the Jigspace Creator, which allows students to create jigs, which they can then share out via the Jigspace app. So while this is Blend, you can see how it would then go into some type of content creation. And I will stop sharing. Okay.
Yeah, we're seeing increasing features added to a lot of these products that are allowing you to go beyond what we originally were calling Blend. As Jesse said, in Jigspace, now you can create with that same tool. And there's multiple applications that are doing that and will do that in the near future. So our Absorb, Blend, and Create is more of a use case than it is an absolute rule for a product.
And I feel like the people were robbed because I didn't give my pop culture connection for AR Blend. But that's Minority Report when you think about the fact that scene where Tom Cruise is actually manipulating screens in midair. The interesting thing to think about that is he's not wearing glasses. So this is not about something that is eyesight, right? Ultimately, the definition of AR is digital content overlaid on top of the real world. How you're doing that is totally irrelevant in terms of the types of tools you're using. So finally, we move over toward the create portion of AR. And, just kind of moving ahead a little bit, and by the way, the Pop Culture Connection is, a bunch of episodes of Black Mirror. But Micah, I wanted to pass things over to you to talk about CoSpaces. And specifically, I'm actually going to run this video. I'll put it on mute just because you can talk over what we're seeing here.
Yeah, so this is CoSpaces. They have a freemium feature where you can build one world. You build it in virtual reality. You can view it in virtual reality, but you can also launch the same world in augmented reality. So here you can see the students placed animals in a virtual world. Then they click the augmented reality button, and here are those very same animals in their world. So now you've got a whole new storyline of choreography and student directors creating a movie using a screen capture of their iPad. It's a really great tool. I love that it has a freemium feature to play with. Their classroom management system is really great as well if you wanted to make a more robust learning experience for your students. But CoSpaces, really, really cool. Again, virtual reality and augmented reality creation.
And, in a longer version of this session, we've actually done some kind of hands-on, just walking through some of the coding aspects of this. But it's a very robust tool in terms of the types of learning opportunities available within that, right? Mm-hmm. So we talked about augmented reality. We're going to shift over to talking about VR, and I would definitely recommend these videos. Seniors and kids trying VR for the first time, if you just, to watch at a later date, but they're pretty great. Now moving back to Absorb, but on the VR side of things. Micah, what are we looking at right here?
So this is my first time looking at a VR video. So this was released by the USA Today on their website. It was embedded in Facebook, and now it's on YouTube. And it's a 360 video of the Blue Angels. So this puts you in the cockpit, and if Jesse scrubs ahead a little bit, you can see just how close these pilots get to each other while they're flying. It's absolutely unbelievable. Now, isn't that crazy? The same video launched through the YouTube app on your phone will allow you to use your phone like you're in the window of the cockpit. So you'll move around and you'll be seeing what they see. Because we're looking at the web desktop version, we have a little Gravis pad in the top with left, right, up, down arrows Jesse could click, or he can drag with his mouse. That's something that.
It's funny. I was dragging the whole time. The whole time we've been doing this, I didn't even notice that pad was there.
I look for that pad to remind me that it is 360. It only appears on 360 videos in YouTube.
But what's important to note is this is a YouTube video, right? And I think the reason this is important, and just skipping ahead a couple slides really quickly, notice that we're not talking about immersive VR. When I talk about VR, I even include things like this is just Google Street View.
Right.
So digital environments, whether or not they're immersive or not, qualify based on the definition of what we talk about when we're talking about virtual environments. One of my favorite pop culture examples, and I already kind of fast forwarded it, but there's a scene, since there's an ad, we're not going to do that, but in Monsters, Inc., where they showed how they're training to scare kids using virtual technology. But, we take a look at things like Google Earth. All of these things have components that fall into VR Absorb. The Blue is another one that that's a great experience. But Mike, I wanted to kind of bring things back to where you can talk through what it looked like using the Anne Frank House experience. And I'll actually, the video that I'm going to be, the picture on the left is actually Micah's class. Mm-hmm. The video, Micah, why don't you tell us a little bit about that while it plays?
Yeah, so I used a screencast feature from an Oculus Go and cast it to an iPad and then green screen overlaid it, just so you could get an idea. It's so hard to really articulate the power of VR through a 2D screen. You really have to experience it. But here's one of my students, Molly. Molly's hearing about the background of the Anne Frank story. She had read it in English class. She came to social studies class with me, and now she's experiencing the Anne Frank story with a young actress narrating in the background. You can see her waving like she's trying to touch the wall, figuring out where everything is. It's pretty cool. If we scrub ahead a little bit here, you'll see the students were in a 360 world, and she's coming to the point where she's going to find the bookshelf. There's the bookshelf. She'll click on the bookshelf, and she'll be able to enter into the secret annex in the Anne Frank story. When I first did this with students, the experience started with a room full of giggles. And because of the power of the medium, the story, very quickly the room got very sober and quiet. The students afterwards were just commenting on how powerful the experience was, how they could feel and sense and realize more about Anne Frank and the seriousness of her conversation. And then, of course, spoiler alert, Anne Frank does die. When they hear about Anne Frank dying, they heard about it in English, they read about it. When they experience Anne Frank and then are reminded that she passes away, it's a whole different affect. They have an emotional connection with the story.
So, in addition to these type of immersive experiences, we've actually at Ready Learner One, we've found ways to kind of use this as a training vehicle for many different possibilities. And Micah, why don't you talk through what we're seeing in the video, and then I'll share one other example.
So here's a way that we use 360 videos in a choose your own adventure style for training purposes. So here's an airport hangar. If we wanted to train employees how to hard skills, how to react in an emergency in an airport. This storyline has them looking around. They see cues. They'll click the cue, look up, plane's on fire. What am I supposed to do? Well, we should extinguish it. So now we look for how do we extinguish. Again, we're looking all over the place. We go to the extinguisher, click. I don't remember which one I click in this. Probably the wrong one. I'm not very good at putting out fires in airport hangars, it turns out.
Spoiler alert, based on his score, you don't want Micah with you if there's a fire at the airport.
Yeah, so here's your star rating. What's cool about this is you can do this on a phone, a desktop, or on a VR headset. Now, the VR headset, of course, is more immersive. And when you think about the sound in an airport hangar, then you make a truly meaningful experience for your learners. And so if this is the future of the workforce, then in education, we want to start getting students ready to learn with this medium.
But also, Micah, one important thing about this type of training tool is that it provides a consistent experience in terms of training and assessment, right? So one use in schools that we've actually had for this, and we actually have a demo of this within the platform, which is when I went through my teacher prep program, classroom management was never something they could teach, right? You read the Harry Wong First Days of School book, and then we're kind of thrown in the classroom, you just figured it out. But what you're able to do now is actually create scenarios where teachers have to basically figure things out within the experience. And again, they could do this with headsets or simply on a tablet. And ultimately, they're assessed based on the choices they make. So within the platform, you might have noticed there was customer service experiences, as well as experiences tailored toward education. Because again, Ready Learner One, we do work in the corporate space and in K-12 and higher education. But these are the types of things that companies are actually using. Like, so Verizon, for instance, we walked through a bunch of their experiences. They basically have an entire segment of their company now dedicated to developing these types of choose your own adventure experiences to kind of train and assess. So VR Blend is, as you can imagine, a little bit more of an elevation over that Absorb, where you're interacting with the platform a little bit more. There's a ton of different platforms we love for this. And actually, when the pandemic first hit, I think most people thought this was the time for VR Blend type experiences. But the truth is, I don't think the pandemic was the time to be getting headsets and sharing them around with people. So it might not have been there. But the pop culture example, if you take a look at this clip when you're looking at the slides later, Disclosure, which is a movie from 1994, actually featured a similar idea to the virtual environment. One of our favorite platforms to use is actually called AltSpace VR. It's a Microsoft platform. And we actually partnered with Microsoft and AltSpace to create a variety show that we've run I think about a dozen times, called the Ready Learner One Lounge, where we bring in experts. During the pandemic, this was as close to in-person conferences as we got. And just to kind of give you a sense, this could be done through the desktop or could be done in a VR headset. So we were actually on stage presenting alongside people. And, you know, this is Bobby Carlton interviewing Ryan Andes, who's an actor and does a lot of voiceover work. But this was all done in VR with our headsets, and we simply recorded it. So these type of platforms and experiences are open to where we had 50 to 100 people in the room actually able to do that. But it's not limited to just in-person interactions. Christine, why don't you tell us a little bit about the Xennial Digital Portal?
Sure. So the Xennial Digital Portal has, actually, I think they're up to 20 different lab style experiences for students. So everything from biology labs where you're dissecting a fetal pig to chemistry labs, which is what we're looking at right now, where you're mixing very dangerous chemicals that we would never actually allow high school students to mix. Skate parks where you're measuring velocity and speed of skateboarders, measuring using radar lab with a train and train station. So it provides all of these really amazing learning experiences in a totally immersive, hands-on opportunity that our students otherwise would never really have those experiences, right? We're not doing things like that in schools because they're just not replicable in a safe and affordable way for our students to teach them. So it's a really powerful platform, some really high-end assets that are involved within those different experiences. And Xennial Digital is actually the company that did the animations in the book Reality Bytes. So you can see some of their work in that book as well.
So I want to, there are slides here for you guys to take a look at beyond what we're going to talk about today, because looking at the clock, I just want to make sure we have a chance to do that hands-on demo that Micah was going to run us through. But there's some examples of other platforms like Roomy that can give you a greater sense of what's possible in that VR blend type environment. So finally landing on VR Create, as you can imagine, that's our deeper, richer experiences of actual content creation. One of our favorite tools to show, and Ready Player One is actually a great example in pop culture of how we could do that. But in VR Create, Google Tilt Brush is actually one of our favorite things to show. And I'm going to show you a video of VR Rosie, who's a famous artist who does some amazing work in Tilt Brush. But while we're looking at this, Christine, why don't you share how you've used Tilt Brush in your school?
Sure. So Tilt Brush is an amazing art creation tool that basically turns your entire surroundings into a blank canvas and gives you every possible brushstroke, color, effect you could ever want. So we brought a multiple disabilities classroom back into our district, students who we typically would have sent out of district to a school specializing for their needs. We were fortunate enough to be able to provide a really high quality program. The one thing that we were lacking was the ability to give students that sort of art therapy approach when they needed it. So a lot of the students that we brought in were nonverbal, oftentimes became very frustrated and were not able to articulate their feelings and emotions. So we took Tilt Brush as an opportunity to give those students an infinite canvas where they could express themselves, whether it was joy, anger, frustration, sadness. And through that art, we were able to have their case manager and their counselor work with them and sort of navigate the visual aspect of those emotions to help that child navigate through their day. So it was a really powerful way of giving creation and voice to some of our highest needs learners.
So very quickly, before I toss it over to Micah to take us through a quick demo of a VR environment, a web-based VR environment, I just wanted to walk you through a case study for how we envision VR being a game changer and how it was a game changer in distance learning. So this is a pine cone that Micah found in his backyard, and using the iNaturalist app, he was able to identify it was the Norwegian spruce. But because our students were not all together, he was unable to bring this into his classroom for students to be able to take a look at. So what he was able to do was, using the Clone app, he was able to scan in this pine cone and turn it into a digital asset. So here's Micah scanning it in, and what we find later is here is that pine cone, but now as a digital asset, which can be brought into either an AR or VR environment, right? Because once we have it digitized, we can do whatever we want with it. This is an environment called Spatial. And in Spatial, we have, this is our Ready Learner 1 sandbox. So you can see we have all types of things. Mike and I were doing work in this space for a while. You could see we have posters hung up on the wall with notes that we've been taking, images, videos. You can even see he's streaming video of him in his actual home, in addition to the avatars, the scanned-in avatars of Micah and myself that are in this space. But just skipping ahead, one thing to show you is we were able to not just look up pine cones from their library, but we were able to bring that scanned-in asset into this space. So now these types of spaces can support a number of learners. We're now at a place, and again, this is not something that requires a virtual headset. This can be done on a web-based device where we can actually now be together in a virtual space, sharing digitized versions of physical objects from the world around us. And so, Micah, I just wanted to throw it over to you now to be able to take us through a quick demo. So the next section is actually VR for remote learning. And we talk about some of the platforms we've already talked about, but Micah wanted to show us Mozilla Hubs.
Yeah, so again, adding to the social learning side of things where we can get people together, Mozilla Hubs offers a free platform that's web-based. You can view it on WebVR in 360, view it on your phone, on your Chromebook. I've done with students. To be fair, once we get in, it might be a little choppy because we're also streaming a video here, but we'll give it a shot. So I'm posting a link right now, hub.link in the chat. And if you click on that link, you can get into this platform without signing in. So it does not collect your login data. You don't have to use your G Suite to get in. You can just click and enter this virtual reality room called Hub Commons.
For those of you, who are I was for a decade a district technology officer. Christine is one now. We know how important data privacy is. It is not capturing any information about a student. Students are not required to provide any type of identifying information. It just allows you to join the room using the code that Micah just gave us.
Yeah, and it looks like we have almost 10 people already in the room. Once you pop in the room, you can, if you're on a keyboard, you can use your left, right, up, down arrows. The letter Q and the letter E will rotate your character, or you can use your mouse to drag and look around. Whole bunch of people popping in. That's great. There you go. You can change your name, pick an avatar. Really, really a cool room.
For those of you who are familiar with Google Expeditions and know that it's kind of being retired, if you check out our blog on ReadyLearner.one, Micah actually created a workflow where you can actually take 360 photospheres and create virtual environments that can be toured using Mozilla Hubs for free.
Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and bring in some objects. Go ahead and click the place button, bottom central. That will allow you to bring in different objects and play with 3D assets. Looks like somebody brought a book in. That's pretty cool. And so this would allow us to bring in, a car and walk around a car and look at the car, and things that would be difficult to bring into a classroom otherwise, I guess is the point. With your LiDAR technology on your iPhone, you're able to scan assets. You can upload those into Sketchfab and bring in Sketchfab objects as well.
Now, keep in mind, even though we're all doing this probably through our web browsers, you could do this through a headset.
Yes, and just by going to the website, actually, you don't download an app. It's amazing. All right, cool. There's a share button here. I'm trying to, I think someone has their camera mic on. The share button lets us bring up a camera, so I can bring up my web camera. I'm bringing up my webcam in Mozilla Hub. So you'll see my avatar, but now you'll see a TV in the room. And in a moment, might be a little rough on my bandwidth to do both right now. I should pop up on that screen. There we go. It's just taking a moment to come in. So pretty cool tool. I like that it's free. It's paired with another product called Spoke. Spoke will allow you to create your own worlds. So if you have students who are Minecrafters, they might want to use their Minecraft skills to make a new world. Pretty cool.
So So, like I said, there's a ton of different possibilities here because, again, you can choose, and Micah, I know we don't have a lot of time to do this now, but you can switch environments. So if there's a different environment that's more suitable to your particular need, this is one that we happen to like. But, there's a ton of different types of environments to choose from, as well as the fact that you can create your space and set it up for the type of learning you want to do. Micah can actually place people in seats so that they're all positioned in a particular way. So there's a lot of options. It's, something to definitely experiment with and kind of get used to. But this is, when people ask us how we see teachers using some of this stuff right now, this is one of the first things we talk about because it's web-based VR, so it doesn't require the headset. It's free, and it also encompasses most of the feature sets from a lot of the tools we talk about in that in the tools we've looked at, particularly in the remote learning space. Spatial falls in line with a lot of these as well. And actually, if you're looking at the slide deck, that whole next session was essentially remote learning tools. So, I mean, we have other slides there, but we did want to make sure we have about 10 minutes left. So I know we wanted to open it up for discussion and conversation. We wanted to make sure we went through the full framework and different tools from various pieces of the framework, but we'd love to answer any questions that you have. Unless they're on activity theory, in which case we don't want to hear it. We can talk about that.
Sure we do. Thanks, Paul. This is our jam. You can probably tell, right? We're enjoying ourselves. My cheeks always hurt after a session like this because I love this stuff. I'm always smiling.
So, this has been an interesting couple of weeks because I feel like Christine and I have been fielding a lot of phone calls from districts, with budget, budget seasons are about to roll over. So some districts have funds. What's the best way to start to kind of build capacity at the school level? What types of hardware do you need to get started? The truth is, it doesn't require a lot. Like as we're showing you, it could be, the answer is no. Then at least don't smile while you're doing it at school. You don't want them to see that. So, Christine, what are some ways you would recommend for districts to get started at kind of different tiers?
Yeah, so the district that I work in, we're a pre-K through 8th grade district. And so we do a lot of, we're fortunate that we have a VR lab in our 3rd through 8th grade building, our upper grade levels building, which is appropriate and fantastic. But putting a headset on our littlest learners is often really challenging, right? So our little 3-year-olds, I have a whole classroom full of special needs 3-year-olds, and this technology is a really great way to engage them, but putting a headset on them is unrealistic. So being able to take augmented reality and really make that the entry level point for your younger learners or maybe your sensory sensitive learners is just a really great starting point, and it's really easy for teachers.
I actually think if you were to ask the 3 of us just offline, we would probably tell you we think AR is going to make more of an impact sooner rather than VR. And don't get me wrong. One of the things we've been doing, and hopefully we have an opportunity to come out and do this for you guys in person next year, but most of the events we've been presenting at, we've been running full innovation labs for educators where we bring out the hardware and actually allow educators to try immersive virtual reality through classroom uses. But the truth is, a lot of that AR content doesn't require that, and I think nothing matches that immersive VR, but I also think there's an easier road to adoption for some of that augmented reality piece. And great question in the chat, the real challenge is changing teacher practice to properly engage in this. Absolutely, right? So this is part of having your district technology plan and your, whether you want to call it an incubator or,
Right.
innovation, setup. So you have teachers, those early adopters, but our goal at Ready Learner 1 has been in accelerating those adoption timelines by modeling the use of these technologies and ultimately showing the benefits to be gained for the classroom. So I think if you were to show someone, the Anne Frank experience, which again is immersive VR and requires the headset, you're going to see one thing. But I think if you start to model some of those AR uses, you're going to see that there's some really powerful uses that do not require any additional hardware purchasing, simply teacher buy-in and how you model that.
Yeah, I mean, and we firmly believe that, budgeting for the technology is, of course, a major priority, but that's got to be paired with budgeting for teacher professional development, because there's a real shift in practice. If we want this new technology to be fully adopted, then not integrated, adopted, difference there. We have to have educators who are have experience and have comfort and are ready and they see relevance, because they're the gatekeepers of the technology in the classroom at many levels.
Oh, wait, do we have a question in the Q&A? Okay, what resources do you guys recommend for that include more than pre-built content so it isn't overwhelming for teachers that are already stressed with time?
So
Sorry, go ahead.
I think it depends upon which technology you're talking about. And so if you're talking about virtual reality, I know that Vive has just come out with a whole education package. So their latest headset has all these pre-built experiences, and it's actually all aligned
that one's
to
not showing up on the share.
that is standards aligned.
Well, that's all right, though. I mean, folks can pull it.
So that's just one option.
You'll go out to the registry, pull them up, and
Mike, I had a thought for large video.
Yeah, it's Joe. Can you mute Joe? Thank you. I think it starts with a meaningful conversation with the teacher about what their instructional goals are individually. So instead of saying you're going to use virtual reality this year, it's about what learning experiences do you teach? What learning experiences do you think could use some work? What's your moonshot? And then start with the moonshot and then come up with a plan. I don't think it's cookie cutter. I just don't think it's cookie cutter.
Yeah. So what I was going to say was, my approach has always been, this isn't an add-on, right? We're not saying, okay, here's augmented virtual reality. Let's view this as a separate thing from the work we do. Ultimately, it's how does this technology enhance the teaching and learning that we're already doing? And so, Christine and I were on a call today talking with the school district about embedding AR through their coding initiatives. So there's a ton of ways to make this accessible through the work you're already doing. And I think that's the easiest way to kind of create that teacher buy-in, is show them that it's going to make their lives easier.
Yeah.
It's going to make the student learning outcomes better.
Yeah, and I like Garen's question about getting started. Garen, I would tell people to pull out their phones, go to Google and Google Tiger, and they'll place an augmented reality tiger right in the room with their own personal phone. I mean, it just becomes very real when we leverage technology that people are very comfortable with, and then we can talk about next steps. So
Garen also made a good point about, technology expenditures in terms of, carts that don't get used. So just so you don't feel alone, I was there too. We did the Google Expeditions thing, spent the money on the cart, and now Google Expeditions, what do we do? Well, ultimately, those devices we can still leverage those.
Yeah.
And I also think the technology has now evolved to the point where the use cases and what we could do with it, it's not just a cool, shiny thing. So we've actually done a lot of work with a school in Iceland where they have a really robust VR lab setup, almost similar to the cart, but if it was, fully mounted and ready to go. And ultimately, what we've shifted towards is how do we now leverage that resource through other content areas, right? So they're using it now for content creation, and actually through their fabrication lab, we can actually have them creating content that can now be 3D printed and used in other subject areas. So when you start to think about some of the STEM initiatives you may have, or even at the younger grades through Minecraft and things like that, there's a ton of different ways to leverage that VR equipment for some of the more up-to-date use cases that are there.
Yeah, and I like Garen thinking about which educators do you think would use this technology, give them access to it, and let them start to become champions at a grassroots level for adoption across a whole school, rather than just saying, here's this cart of technology, use it. Tap them on the shoulder, somebody that you think is really going to take advantage of that.
By the way, Joe had a great point. One of the things we do here is, right, as technology leaders, we scavenge we're scavengers from the old initiatives, right? And by the way, Garen, 100%. PD, if you're not planning for PD while you're doing it, you might as well not do it. I mean, if you don't have a plan for professional development support, which is ultimately, I think, how we got started as a company, was recognizing that was a big part toward adoption. But just getting back to the point I was making about what Joe wrote, yeah, Google Expeditions is gone. Great. As Christine mentioned before, all you need is an iOS device for some of those things. So great. Those devices are still used. We can still bring that stuff back to life. But, Garen, hopefully, the lesson learned here is that with any initiative, specifically when you're looking at emerging technologies, and we'll talk a little bit more about this tomorrow night in the esports session, these are things you have to account for up front. Otherwise, you're kind of, doomed to fail.
Yeah, and Garen, feel free to drop one of us an email. I'd love to unpack exactly what's in that cart and what we can do with it.
Let's scavenge together.
Yes.
Okay, we have reached the end of our journey. I want to thank Christine, Jesse, and Micah for their time today at Ready Learner 1. I appreciate you guys being with us today. We had several folks join us, so really enjoyed the conversation and the questions. I think there's a lot to unpack generally. Also want to thank our sponsor for this session, which was New Line Interactive, or Interactive Displays. I'm not sure if they were on today with us or not, but I did want to thank them. They were one of our major sponsors for this. So
I would have worn my New Line shirt. I have a Star Wars shirt. It would have been perfect.
I know. I was supposed to say it at the beginning, so I'm saying it at the end. I do want to thank them since everybody's still here. So thanks truly to New Line Interactive for their support of ACPE and their specific support to this session. So they must be fans of yours as well. So thanks again, everyone. If our speakers want to stay on for a second, we'll take you backstage and follow up, and then we'll be finished. So thanks. And we've got a 6 o'clock social session. We may be cooking, and there's also bartending. Don't forget that. And we've got 2 other things. So you may have gotten your bar kit to do your own cocktails, or you may have also gotten the sea scallops kit to be making dinner. So we'll see you all very soon, and we'll see you tomorrow. Yeah, we got a little bit of fun. Not doing it in person, so we sent the fun to their homes.
Awesome.
I love it.
All right.
That's awesome.
All right, thanks everyone. I think I'll take you backstage and we'll go from there.
Great.
It's now done. Jennifer, are you gone? Yeah.